Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's an absolute delight for me to present to you today a wonderful topic on evaluating resiliency of digital infrastructure, part of the focus webinars that we are having on some very, very interesting topics. We have two brilliant minds, Stuart Wilson and Thomason Crowley, who will be presenting on, I think, this very, very important topic, which is in the minds of everybody today. We have Mr. Ashish Jain from Aeon, who will be speaking to you, introducing the topic. My name is Ravi Shankar Thandavan. I am the General Secretary of the Forum of Critical Utility Services. It's one of a kind body in the world which has been formed in order to bring together all aspects of the built environment, starting from architecture to structural engineering to insurance and risk mitigation to fire safety, vertical transportation, plumbing, solid waste management, liquid waste management. Every aspect, every utility of a built environment, professionals from these environments would be part of focus, and the objective is to try and bring in and build a resilience with a keen attention to sustainability in our efforts. With that having said, I would like to play a video which probably better describes what focus is. And once we are done, we will introduce the speakers to you. Lakshmi, could we have the focus video, please?
We are delighted to present to you the Forum of Critical Utility Services, the acronym of which is FOCUS. Much as the acronym suggests, the role of the Forum of Critical Utility Services is to bring in focus all that concerns the construction industry. This is not just for India, but for a coordinated construction industry world over. For those of you who may not be aware, this initiative is to prepare and present a platform where all the verticals of the critical utility services of the construction industry forge into one formidable group that will strive in building unity, aid in diffusing misconceptions, and present itself as a platform for discussions amongst these bodies of professionals. This initiative was born on the 26th of October 2020, when the world was almost silent from the after effects of the pandemic. We say silent because the cry for help and riddance from the clutches of the pandemic were deafening. There simply was no place that was safe anywhere in the world. None of the formidable structures that man had erected was safe for protection from the pandemic. It was during these times that we decided on creating a platform so as to be able to present improved and concerted methodologies of developing projects that shall not just be sustainable or resilient, but also deliver safe environment and a valuable business opportunity to the promoters, not just for some time, but for long time to come. Times when another generation will inherit the good work that we do today. Our efforts begin with drawing the strength from the fields of architecture, electrical, plumbing, HVAC, safety, fire, security, illumination, vertical transportation, IBMS and IT, solid waste management, and last but not the least, facility management. Bring them together and forge them into one strong wheel of change to deliver structures that stand in harmony with Mother Nature on planet Earth. And thus, ladies and gentlemen, is our mission. Only when we come together and share our ideas and aspirations will we find the stumbling blocks. It is here then that when we are together and focus towards one goal, we will jointly be able to understand and address our challenges as one formidable force. Not just a force in India, but for a global movement that will find solutions, opportunities, and the means to address productivity, safety, quality, developing skills, training, evolving standards, and ensuring their implementation, thereby becoming centers of excellence and setting benchmarks for generations to pursue and improve. And this is our vision. We have embarked upon reaching out to various verticals of the critical utility services. We will thereafter jointly present our cause to the government and policymakers. We will present our vision to the builders. And we are confident that we will break the shackles of inequality, indifference, ignorance, and mistrust, and build a world that is one with nature. Ladies and gentlemen, we are not here to conjure a forum, but we are here to establish a body that shall have trust, integrity, and honesty for its foundation, and stand on the pillars of knowledge, commitment, enthusiasm, and foresight of its people. Our invitation to you is open. Come and become a part of Focus. It is your contribution and support to Focus that will make a difference to the new India that is being created. Let's join and make this the Bharat that we wear, shining, prosperous, bright, and a true world leader. Let's now focus.
So, ladies and gentlemen, you would by now have understood what we are into, what Focus is all about. We encourage you to become members if you are if you are a professional from any utility of a built environment. If you are a professional, we encourage you to become a member and lend your hand in support to the resiliency that we are trying to build within the construction industry with a sense on sustainability. So www.ourfocus.co is our website. You will find us there. You could, connect to the site and become your member. Now, may I have the profile of Mr. Ashish Jain, who would speak on the topic here? Mr. Ashish Jain will be introducing the topic, which is evaluating resiliency of digital infrastructure. Mr. Ashish K. Jain is a seasoned partner at AEON, boasting over 19 years of extensive expertise in sustainability, green buildings, BIM, interior design, and architecture. His professional journey spans across diverse international projects in India, USA, Europe, and the Middle East, where he's spearheaded sustainability groups, establishing himself as a thought leader in the field. Ashish is renowned for his profound knowledge and contributions to sustainable building design, focusing on passive design strategies, energy and water efficiency, integrated designs, and promoting concepts like net zero and low carbon. As a member of various esteemed forums, including ISHRE, CII, Climate Change Council, and several technical committees within IGBC, he actively influences industry professionals towards eco-conscious designs that prioritize occupant comfort and well-being. His dedication to advancing sustainability is evident through the prolific presentations, lectures, and affiliations with premier institutes and international organizations. That's Mr. Ashish Jain for you. Ashish, may I request you to kindly present the importance of the topic that we are delving on today.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Ravi Shankar. Thanks for introduction. And I'm glad to be here for this such an exciting topic. And today's time, there couldn't be a better time to discuss this topic of digital infrastructure. And the so when we talk of digital, it's a part of everyone's life today, whether or not it's accessing our mails in our offices or our homes, doing calls, interacting with each other, or even the kind of seminar that we are doing right now. It's all a part somewhere to the digital infrastructure. What is digital infrastructure in buildings? I think that's something which is important to understand, and how its resiliency is equally important in our buildings is something which is very important to talk about. So when we talk of digital infrastructure in buildings, it's basically a network of interconnected systems which control and manages a building's functionality. Whether it's smart lighting in our buildings, climate control systems, automated security systems, or the data networks, all these systems play a vital role in ensuring not just the energy efficiency that we keep talking about, but also occupant comfort and the overall building performance. And to me, digital infrastructure is actually the invisible backbone of the building. In today's world, when we are looking at multi-dimensional elements coming to our buildings, in today's era where not just buildings or the corporations, but where countries are pledging for net zero emissions, I think the buildings where we live and work in, they're undergoing a massive transformation. So we have to look at overall performance of the building, not only from efficiency, but also from comfort and safety and everything else. So today, our buildings are no longer just bricks and mortar, but they comprise of more complex ecosystems, which are reliant on a hidden layer, which is called digital infrastructure, which is the backbone of the building today. If we look at the research documents, they also give us some really interesting and exciting facts. Global smart market building is projected to reach us $84.2 billion by 2028. As per CBRE research also, there are 70% of the occupants who believe that smart building technology actually enhances their work performance. So it's evident that the buildings that we are designing today and the infrastructure that we lay down in those buildings for the years to come in the form of digital infrastructure, it has to be robust. So investing in a robust digital infrastructure is no longer an option for us, but it's actually a necessity. And by ensuring its resiliency and future proofing capabilities, we can actually create much smarter, sustainable, and even more important, occupant centric buildings, which is what is required for people who are actually using those. With all these elements into place, when we talk of digital infrastructure, which not only includes network cabling and Wi-Fi, but it also includes elements like building automation system, smart technologies, sensors, smart devices, the lighting systems, controls, security in the form of our access control, fire alarms, everything. I think they have to not just be installed in the building, but we have to look at how resilient are those. And that's where the resiliency comes like a most critical question, because these systems have to work in the times when they are most important. So resiliency is a very important subject when we talk of digital infrastructure, especially in today's era when everything is dependent on the functioning of the building of its digital infrastructure. So this webinar that we're talking about today will delve deep into this topic, which is much more crucial for us, and we'll explore all key considerations for evaluating the resiliency of these. As Mr. Ravi Shankar introduced, we do have a fantastic panel of experts lined up to share their knowledge on this subject. So I invite you to be ready for learning quite an exciting material and even the wide score certifications which are also available in this digital infrastructure component. So let's look forward for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashish. Thank you very much for that introduction. Uh, I guess everybody understands the importance of digital resiliency these days. And let's now hear Thomasin present her presentation. But before that, could we have Thomasin's introduction, please, on the screen? Yes. So Thomasin Crowley is the Vice President Asia Pacific at WiredScope. Tommy, as she is very popularly known, is responsible for leading the Asia Pacific region and growing the company's footprint across the continent. Over the past 2 years, Tommy has overseen the fast-paced growth of WiredScope in this region, launching across 4 new markets, building a regional team, and overseeing the rollout of the firm's certification across 80 meters square of space, over 180 buildings, and working with over 60 leading owners. Tommy is passionate about meaningfully improving our built environment for people and the planet, educating key industry stakeholders on the important role technology plays in achieving these goals. Prior to joining WiredScope, Tommy was a project leader at Boston Consulting Group, where she advised clients on their digital transformation strategy around the globe, from London to New York, and most recently in Hong Kong. She was also the chief of staff to the chairman and CEO at the Daily Mail and General Trust PLC in the United Kingdom. Tommy holds an MBA from Harvard Business School and a bachelor's degree from the University of Cambridge. That's Thomasin Crowley for you. Yes, Thomasin, it's yours now. Please go on.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Mr. Ravi Shankar and Mr. Ashish Jain for the fantastic introduction, and to the Full Focus organization for inviting us to partake today. We're really delighted and excited to be sharing some of our perspectives with you, and increasingly working in India. I'm going to start off by just sharing a little bit about who we are at WiredScore and why we have such expertise in this space before I pass to my colleague Stuart, who will dive more into how you measure digital resiliency in buildings and what kind of things you need to be monitoring and looking for. So allow me just to share my screen. Hopefully that's shared okay. So a little bit about WiredScore. Why are we talking to you today on this topic? Our mission as a business is to make the world's buildings smarter and better connected. And how we do that is by setting a global standard for technology in the built world via certification and education. So in India, you'll be very familiar with the USGBC's LEED certification and with IWBI's WELL certification. And I know you have your own Indian Green Building Council. Each of those organizations plays the same role as WiredScore, but in different spaces. So USGBC for sustainability and IGBC for sustainability, IWBI and their WELL certification for health and well-being. We are that global certification and body and standard setter for technology in the built world. And specifically, we've got 2 certifications. One on the left-hand side here is called WiredScore, and that is our global digital connectivity rating scheme covering over 4,500 buildings. And in a nutshell, and we'll talk more about it today, what WiredScore dives into is the nuts and bolts of what influences a resilient, seamless digital connectivity, internet and mobile experience in a building. Looks at everything within the owner or developer's control. Then on the right-hand side, we've got our Smart School certification, which is the largest smart building certification globally. And Smart Score is a more aspirational measurement, and the smart spectrum, it kind of pushes along the aspiration spectrum, if you like. And here we look more holistically at smart technology implementation to drive on 4 key outcomes. A more inspirational building for users. It's frictionless. It's more easy to navigate. It makes me more productive in my day, firstly. Secondly, a more sustainable building, so using technology to reduce the operating carbon of an asset. Thirdly, a more operationally efficient building. And fourthly, a more future resilient building. And Smart Score was launched in 2021 in collaboration with over 90 leading landlords, developers, occupiers around the world to define a definition for what it means to have a smart building and how you get there. So those are our two standards, and through working with over 1,000 owners globally, we've amassed some great expertise in this space, and that's what we want to share with you today. We're going to focus today on digital connectivity. And the reason we're going to focus on digital connectivity is digital resiliency and your digital infrastructure is a journey. And the first thing you've got to do in any building is really ensure that the digital connectivity infrastructure is incredibly resilient and solid before you can layer any smart building technologies on top of that. So that's going to be our focus today. Of course, in the Q&A, we can take questions as they come up on smart buildings more generally. A little bit about us. You've probably never heard of us in India before. And the reason for that is we are only just launching in India later this month. But as a business, we actually started back in 2013. And we started in New York City in a public-private partnership with Mayor Michael Bloomberg when he was mayor of New York. And Mayor Bloomberg had a challenge on his hand. And it was that businesses in New York were relocating people to the West Coast, to Silicon Valley, areas really renowned for tech and innovation hubs. And part of the reason they were doing that was they were not having a good experience in New York real estate. They could move into an office and understand if it was grade A, understand the light, the floor plate, and many other features, but they could still move in and have a terrible connectivity experience. And Bloomberg wanted to solve that problem and increase the competitiveness of Manhattan. And so in partnership with our founder and CEO, Ari Barendrecht, they created the WiredScore rating as one rating for all stakeholders across the real estate ecosystem, from designers, consultants, to brokers, to tenants, to owners and developers, to really understand the quality of digital connectivity, what good looks like and how to get there. Fast forward, we then expanded into the UK in 2015, spent the next 5 years expanding quickly across Europe, and really began our Asia Pacific journey in 2019 when we launched in Australia. But it's only been in the last 2.5 years when myself and Stuart, who we'll meet later, joined the WiredScore Asia Pacific business that we've been growing out our presence in Singapore, Hong Kong, Thailand. We added New Zealand, and India. We are very, very excited about is our next market to launch later this month. And we've already been in many discussions and in many of your buildings, learning more about the practices in India. And Stuart will be able to elaborate a little bit on what he's seen. Globally now, we work across almost 1 billion square feet of real estate across 38 countries. India will be the 39th, working with over 1,000 of the leading owners and developers around the globe. So we have the privileged position of seeing almost 5,000 buildings, seeing their infrastructure, learning from it, speaking to them and the occupiers all the time, and continuing to set that standard and push it forward with the industry for the industry. And we work with, so the biggest and best really global developers. I guess a few to highlight here that will be of interest to India is we work with Blackstone across multiple markets, the UK, US, Brookfield, the Middle East, the US, Swire Properties, one of the most innovative leading owners for sustainability globally, actually, and the leader in Hong Kong, and many of the other names that you'll recognize here. And we work on some of the most iconic assets in the world, from the Empire State Building in New York to the Henderson, which is the newest and sort of most innovative, smart, sustainable development in Hong Kong, to One Bangkok, which is a major district development in Thailand, and the Shard in London. And in Asia Pacific State, in the last 2.5 years, we've established a significant presence, working on over 100 million square feet now, with over 70 leading owners and developers, and you can see some of our key partnerships highlighted there. But I won't waste time going into any more detail on those, because I think we want to get to the key topic. So if you'll allow me to continue, the final thing I'll say, and I won't spend too much time here because we'll come back to it at the end, is Why do people work with us on their digital resiliency? Why do they care, and why do they bother to certify it? And there's really three main reasons we work with owners and developers around the world. I'll start with the middle one, which is importantly, and where this interacts with the focus group, is we help them understand how to design on a development and then how to manage a best-in-class building when it comes to the digital infrastructure, so that they can deliver on the best outcomes for their occupiers and ultimately drive their revenues, but also to avoid the risk of costly obsolescence down the road. How do they build a building today that stands the test of time? Or how do they take an asset that was built 10 to 15 years ago, benchmark where they are today, map out that improvement journey and work to make those improvements over time? And that's one of the big pieces that we do, working in partnership and collaboration with consultants and experts around the globe, including the likes of Aon and Mr. Ashish Jain, who introduced us earlier. The other two reasons people work with us is once they've got a great building, how do they communicate that to both occupiers to generate leasing ROI? And there's some good statistics shared there that Wired Score certified buildings actually beat the market benchmark for other grade A buildings with 2.2% higher rents and 3.8% lower vacancies in North America. So they want to use it to attract and retain occupiers. And the third reason is they want to also communicate to their investors all the good things they've done, feeding into their ESG reporting to demonstrate that these assets will continue to deliver good returns now and into the future. So that's just a brief introduction to Wired Score and why we're talking to you on this topic today. But going forward, let's get to the real topic here. Why does digital resiliency matter? And Mr. Ashish Jain gave a good introduction to this. I'll just share a couple more thoughts with you. It's undoubtable, if we look at the commercial real estate space, but also residential, that our needs for connectivity have grown and they've gone wireless. With the advent of COVID-19 and the pandemic that feels quite in the past now, some key changes happened. The first was we all went from on-premise computing, et cetera, to hosting everything in the cloud so we could access everything we needed anywhere in the world. Secondly, we're all now used to hybrid working. We're hosting this webinar online today, and all of that relies on excellent digital connectivity. And thirdly, we have more and more connected devices monitoring our well-being, monitoring our air quality. All of that is powered ultimately by the internet and the connectivity that lies below it. So occupiers' needs and the residents of buildings, but also even the facilities managers, all of our connectivity needs have grown. And at Wired Score, we foresee this only increasing. So with new technologies that will come through, we've got 5G, but as 6G and Wi-Fi 7 come through, all of these are going to create a bigger transmission challenge for our buildings. Wi-Fi 7 and 6G are likely to operate on the same frequency and exacerbate the existing problems we see in buildings today with 5G, where because it's traveling so fast and travels at a different frequency, it can't penetrate materials as easily. And we need distributed antenna systems and different infrastructure in place in our buildings to ensure that the mobile signal stretches the whole way. And 6G and Wi-Fi 7 are only going to exacerbate this challenge. So that's the first thing. Secondly, we're starting to see the reality now of satellite technology being able to provide both internet and mobile, and the opportunity for sort of one potential global provider to provide that coverage. And we're already starting to see in some places in the world, local ISPs starting to work with the satellite provider. So what does that mean for our buildings, and how do we prepare them for that new transmission of internet and mobile? And then thirdly, we've all become accustomed to multiple connected devices, our phones, our smartwatches, other monitors we might wear. We know that that's only going to increase. We've got VR and AR headsets now. Now, those don't yet have a really proven commercial use case in the office environment, let's say. But we're predicting going forward that technology is there. We're gonna see more interaction of the human and the digital going forward, and all of that is going to drive more connectivity requirements. So what does this mean? It means for the occupiers of commercial buildings or the residents of homes, resilient connectivity, resilient digital infrastructure is going to be a non-negotiable. It already is for your big banks, your big technology players, but there's absolutely no denying that need is only increasing going forward. So for owners of buildings and their consultants and providers, it means we've got to prepare our buildings for that challenge to come. We've got to make sure our infrastructure is really sound, so that we can A, attract the best tenants to drive our top line, B, manage our costs so that we don't have really costly retrofits to refit new technologies or add extra capacity to incorporate all of this. And thirdly, we might even be able to find some opportunities to monetize this. We're seeing, owners and developers in the US and other places starting to bundle some services of digital connectivity and other things for their tenants. So all of this paints a picture that digital resiliency of your asset is more important than ever. And what we're not going to cover today is the smart building landscape. But what you can't have is a truly smart building without having a really resilient, solid digital connectivity foundation below it. So that's just a little intro to me. I'm going to pass to Stuart now to talk through what all of this looks like. I'll just stop sharing screen, forgive me. What all of this looks like in a building and how you measure it going forward and manage it. Stuart, over to you.
Yeah. Before Stuart starts off, you must know that Stuart has over 35 years of experience in telecom and smart buildings, and he's going to be speaking on, resiliency. Now, Stuart Wilson is Director of Operations at WiredScore, based in Singapore. Having joined the WiredScore team since its early startup days, Stuart is responsible for helping leading commercial real estate owners, landlords, and developers around the world deliver great internet connectivity and smart technology to their tenants. With over 35 years of industry experience, Stuart's strong background in telecom and cabling infrastructure has aided him in helping to develop and optimize WiredScore rating scheme. WiredScore sets the global standard for technology in the built environment by assessing, certifying, and improving digital connectivity and smart technology in homes and offices across the globe through the WiredScore and SmartScore certifications. So over to Stuart Wilson, who is now going to present on resiliency.
Many thanks, Ravi. Pleasure to be in the group and in the room, the virtual room with everyone. I hope I don't bore you with the technical elements of what I'm about to talk about. As Tommy mentioned earlier, we'll be talking about the connectivity infrastructure today, as opposed to the smart technology structure of a commercial building. And also thank you to Ashish, your amazing words on the almost invisible layer that is known as digital connectivity. I'm going to start off with a really disappointing thing, that all of wireless is actually wired. Very disappointing, I think. But in fact, the faster technology moves and the increase in speeds that's required means that the hardware that's being deployed into buildings demands a higher and higher frequencies. This means that data travels for shorter distances, which in turn increases the requirement of more and more wires and equipment. If 10 of us were sat in a meeting room right now, we'd probably have some 30 plus devices connected to the wireless network. Everything from our laptops to our phones to our watches and our iPads. And the wires or infrastructure supporting all of this will be located above the ceilings, behind the walls, under the floors, etc. And you might say, so what? And why is this important? Well, if you come from a technical training background like Cisco or Huawei, you'll have learned really early on in your career that when trying to locate a fault in a network, you must always check the physical layer first. And that's because 70% of faults are found right there in that physical layer. And that's why it's important, more important than it's ever been, that we manage and maintain that physical network. And for a landlord, that means maintaining and understanding the infrastructure that's now so much in their control. A couple of examples I'll give you just to bring that to life of the infrastructure that we're talking about include like a vertical riser pathway in a building. On this screen here, you can see what happens to those areas in a poorly maintained building over time. This is a rough estimation of what happens in a building when it goes from 5 to 10 years. If you don't manage it correctly, eventually it just becomes a very high risk scenario. And I'll talk a little bit about MDF rooms or telecom rooms, TBE rooms, whatever you choose to call them. They're often left to the suppliers to maintain them with no rules, regulations, or guidelines to keep them accountable for what's happening. And they soon become storage rooms and eventually, as you can see, a real live photo that I took myself, unusable. And if tenants knew that their lifeline, which is the internet, was delivered via these areas, they just wouldn't move in there, or they certainly would move out. So how do we at WiredScore measure digital resiliency? We focus on outcomes, and we do this by using what is now the only globally recognized standard when it comes to digital infrastructure. We care about the occupier's experience. That's what's really important. And we look at 4 pillars that the occupier understands. I'll talk around these very quickly. Resiliency. So as a tenant, how reliable is my internet? Do I have transparency on this? And how can I be assured of true diversity? I want to understand that as a tenant. And when it comes to power of choice, what choices have I got to ensure that my connectivity is as perfect as it can be? I want to know that I've got multiple options available to me before I move in. The future readiness of a building is so important. And I want to know that the space I might be renting for 5, 6, or 10 years is going to be fit for the technology of the future. I certainly don't want to find out that I'm stuck in an asset that's become technically obsolete and my business just can't operate to its full potential. And mobile. Is my building delivering a great mobile experience for me? Not just for me, for my staff, for my visitors, regardless of what time of day, what provider they're using. And again, not just today, but for tomorrow and into the future. So we measure that across 4 different areas, and I'll touch on them at a fairly high level. We have multiple criteria in each of these sections, but I'll try and stay really high level. I think we've got time for questions later if you want to dive into the whys and not. The first thing we measure is connectivity in mobile, and we're measuring the internet service providers. They're actually in the building, and the diversity that they deliver, and also the medium that they deliver on. When I talk about medium, I mean the copper or the fiber, coax, fixed wireless, satellite, Tommy mentioned earlier. So what medium do they deliver the internet on? And we also measure the mobile operators in the building and the service that they deliver, ensuring that it's up to the standard that you would expect in both signal strength and quality. We then look at the infrastructure, which is the biggest part of the building, the hardest part to maintain over time. And it's now important that we measure the sort of connectivity pathways, so their capacity and their diversity. And that includes the intakes into the buildings, the routes to those MDF rooms, and the routes to the vertical risers, all the way out to the tenant's demise and also to the rooftop. And we also ensure that those MDF rooms, those vital areas in the building that hold that technical equipment, that they have the right capacity, that they're well managed, that they're secure, and they have ample power and cooling, etc. We also look at a section called resiliency. It's now becoming vital that the communication equipment found in those rooms, those MDF rooms or comms rooms, and risers, that they have an alternative power source to ensure that the uptime is protected, and it not only delivers the connectivity element, but it's also responsible for delivering IoT and smart building technology that controls many, many parts of a building. It's also vital that we look at the vulnerability of those areas and that they're protected from that ever increasing risk of flooding as we see weather patterns around the world change dramatically. And then the last section we look at is access and readiness. We must make sure that the internet service providers, the mobile operators, the IT and cabling teams that work within the building, that they're installing services, maintaining services, and more importantly, removing redundant equipment, that they're doing that in a controlled, safe, recorded fashion. Without this, every asset will become too high a risk for any tenant from any industry to use as their office. Now, again, to bring it to life with pictures seems to be easier that way. These problems normally exist in older buildings, and that's what I see from my experience. I spent a lot of time in India now looking at older assets, and I really do see a big similarity to the older assets in London. They look pretty similar. In fact, most buildings around the world look similar. And the common failure is owners think it doesn't exist in new buildings, so why measure it? But it's really important to remember that every building out there was once a brand new building. And in these two pictures, the building built in 2009, which is on the left, and the building built in 2008, which is on the right, show that it is possible to maintain a building really successfully. The building on the right is becoming obsolete, and the owner of that asset doesn't know it. And that's what we're passionate about, is bringing that transparency. Here we see a poorly maintained fiber breakout box. So in our criteria, we ensure through certain parts of our criteria, B4 and WiredScore certification ensures that the internet service provider can be located securely, safely, and in a professional environment. This example is taken in a basement underground car park, and that puts any tenant that has services running through this, it puts their service at risk from accidental damage. That could just be a poor parking maneuver, for instance, all the way through to a cybersecurity or data theft risk. In this environment, this is a poorly maintained MDF room. We actually have 8 criteria in our scorecard that's designed to ensure that this area is fit for purpose. It's there to ensure that we help mitigate risk of downtime due to accidental damage or deliberate sabotage. This is the heartbeat of the building. And in this example, you can see it's turned into a storage room, just poorly maintained, probably through a mindset that came from when the internet wasn't as important as it is perhaps today. And in my last example here is that pesky riser picture I showed you before. And we've got 4 sections based around riser pathways, which is the life veins that run through the building. We have to ensure that they're properly maintained and that they're usable both today and into the future, so that assets can thrive really in tomorrow's world. I'm going to quickly hand back to Tommy.
Thank you, Stu. If you don't mind just going down one more. So Stu's talked a little bit, and I touched on this already, but I just wanted to re-emphasize. I think what Stu has really brought to life here is number 2. Some of the risks that are there if you don't manage this infrastructure well, particularly with some of those visuals in older buildings. But I want to re-emphasize on number 2 that it's also really important in new buildings. We work with some of the leading redevelopments in Singapore at the moment, and they haven't got the right infrastructure to set them up for success. Sometimes they've only got one point of entry. Sometimes there's only one riser. They're trying to squeeze space, critical space needed for all of this new technology, whether it's IoT devices or anything. It's all going to be powered by more and more wires and fibers running behind the walls, and they're squeezing out space in their telecommunications rooms and everything else. So I can't emphasize enough how important number 2 is, and whether you think of Brookfield in Dubai, who we work with on their newest development, or whether you think of Lendlease, who are one of the world's leading developers, all of them are using our standards with their consultants to make sure that critical space is protected. And then the other 2 pieces I'd already touched on a little bit, but just as a reminder, we have some great data around attract and retain occupiers. Today, many of you on the line are probably already technical experts. You're probably already doing great work. You're probably already trying to make buildings better. But that isn't always highlighted by the people who sell the space that you're developing, or who are touring it, right? And we provide a standard to communicate all of that complicated technical stuff, and Stu's given you a very high level version of that into an easily understood standard by the market. And the result is that the likes of LinkedIn and Dublin demanded WiredScore Platinum on their European HQ, or Julius Baer in a Swiss investment bank in Hong Kong, EY in Australia. All of these global occupiers use this because it's one way they can get reassurance that the owner and developer has managed this infrastructure or designed this infrastructure well, and they can be reassured that everything's been done to mitigate the risk around their internet downtime. So attracting and retaining occupiers is the other reasons that landlords work with us, to communicate that and generate leasing ROI. And then the third piece is around how do you tell investors that you're doing everything you need to ensure your asset returns good returns into the future. And that's not only about the ESG credentials, the green premium or the brown discount. It's also about resiliency. And a lot of that resiliency is something we cover in WiredScore. It's about the resiliency of the asset to climate change. We're seeing more flash flooding. We're seeing more once in 100 years weather events. All of your infrastructure, your critical infrastructure, needs to be able to resist that. And as a result of our kind of connection with resiliency and also broadly ESG with Smart School, both of our certifications are recognized by GRESB, the leading ESG benchmark globally, and owners and developers get points for undergoing WiredScore and Smart School as part of their GRESB reporting, which is an important thing that global capital looks at now when they're putting their investment dollars in. So that's a very kind of quick summary on who are we, why do we have authority in this space, why do we think digital resiliency is so important, and we're starting today just with that digital connectivity infrastructure due to time, and then how do you go about measuring it. I will kind of wrap there and maybe open for questions, and Stuart, if you're ready, there's already one in the Q&A that I wanted to save for you, which is will wire-free solutions with Bluetooth connectivity help buildings to score more points for WiredScore or on green building ratings? The reason this person's asking the question is because they avoid lots of wire-free solutions actually help to avoid lots of cabling and conduits, etc.
Yeah, interesting question, and keep those coming because they are a good talking point. I tried to say right at the beginning of what I was talking about, wireless isn't wireless. That therein lies the problem. I think it's definitely the way forward for sure, because we always want to maximize the rentable space that we have available. But the counter side of that is to deliver wireless takes more infrastructure. When I talk about infrastructure, I'm talking about cabling and active equipment, so passive and active. And with active comes power, and with power comes heat, and with heat comes cooling, and again comes more cabling. And so you can never really get away from it. And I think that's the key thing developers need to understand is when we design buildings and we push what we think that the reduction on communication space, and that can be pathways or MDF rooms, because fibers are much smaller and etc., is that actually the future is more wireless and Bluetooth and you know, Wi-Fi, Li-Fi, whatever we want to install, whatever the future has for us. The problem is that all of that requires electronics, and until the unthinkable day, that we don't need electricity to do this for us, we're going to have to create space somewhere. And those are the choke points in buildings. And we see it massively in the older buildings of today. And I suspect buildings designed 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago that thought that space could be limited are going to have bigger problems in 5 to 10 years' time. But certainly the buildings of 20 years ago have that problem today. So I think to answer the question would be no. I think you have to look a little deeper. I think from the user output, the user feeling, that yes, that's the way forward. But behind wireless is a wire and power, and we can't get away from that.
Thanks, Stu. Mr. Ravi Shankar, I don't know if you want to, if you're happy for us to continue, we can go through the questions, but I didn't want to take over for anything you had planned.
No, that's perfectly all right. Let's answer these questions because there's a lot of interest in what they have just heard from you. So I guess we should answer these questions.
Sure.
We can go for another 10 minutes, not a problem.
Okay, perfect. Stu, the second question that you and I can both answer, I'll take a first stab, is how do you manage space of a building? And so broadly, we as WiredScore have defined space requirements for this equipment based on we have kind of global councils of leading developers and occupiers that we work with globally. And obviously now we're fortunate to have over nearly 5,000 buildings that we kind of measure off. But we broadly define space based on GFA. So we know that, a 500,000 square foot office building needs about X of space. And I won't give you what X is because I can never remember the numbers off the top of my head. So it's important to get that right from the beginning in the designs. I think the challenge is over time, how do you keep that space free and protected from kind of other needs? And Stu, you can talk a little bit about managing that ongoing in an existing building.
Yeah, for sure. Look, this is moving goalposts all the time. We believe these are the space requirements for different types of technology, and of course we learn as a race together. We learn what that looks like going forward. But what is important is we have. Tommy mentioned 4,500 buildings. The other 4,500 buildings that are public, we've seen 10,000+ buildings. So we have a lot of data to understand. And what we can do is look backwards and say, this building didn't have enough space, and here's the results of it. And so what becomes really apparent is our inability to manage that properly. And I think we could probably lots of industries, but certainly in this industry, and I have to hold my hand up as a poacher turned gamekeeper. I used to make these mistakes. I used to install. I used to be the guy that took the shortcuts, and here I am now trying to fix my mistakes. Because what happens is, as humans, we take the shortcut. It's someone else's problem tomorrow. I'm not coming back here. And it's the old equipment in every building that's causing the problem. And the person that's left with that is the building owner. And so it's really important that you manage that situation so that you maximize the space. You can't just keep reclaiming lettable space in a building to install new equipment, right? So it's the latter part of our scorecard, which is that access and readiness section, is all about processes and procedures around stopping that, tail wagging the dog situation. It's the asset belongs to the owner, and therefore everyone working within it should work to their guidelines.
Super. The next question we've got here is WiredScore in talks with Indian regulators to bring this scoring system to the Indian market? The simple answer to that is yes, a little bit, but we need to be more so. So in every market we enter, we generally enter by working first with the private developers, usually because then that helps us get a good understanding of what the infrastructure looks like in that country. It helps us test our standard against their buildings before we go and collaborate more broadly with the regulators. So we have worked obviously with the City of New York. We're actually part of the City of London's building code as well for new developments. In Singapore, we're working with the government, the Building Construction Authority, and we have worked with many others around the world. So we have been in some discussions with TRI, who are looking at kind of thinking about how they incorporate, I think, connectivity into their building code and your building code in India, and we would love to support that. Our general thesis as a company and kind of approach is that, you know, one tide lifts all boats. So the more people we can educate and help on this, the better. And so we're really keen to help more there. And you know, please do reach out. We are still in the early days in India. It's a market we are so excited about and committed by. And I should say we're in 39 countries globally. We have offices in 5, and India will be the 6th. So we are hiring locally to build out a local team, which means we'll be able to collaborate more with local bodies. So I hope that starts to answer it. It's just the beginning, and we really hope to work further with the bodies in India. I can keep going here. There's a question on what are the challenges you've faced for existing buildings. Stu, it sounds like a good one for you.
Yeah, I think I've touched on it already. And let me tell you, from my perspective, the existing buildings are far more exciting than the new buildings. New buildings, a new canvas, you can paint whatever you like. Existing buildings, you're stuck with what you have, something designed for the world that was designed for. The world we live in today is a different world. And so the challenges that they have are far greater, especially in a world where we're driving to that net zero carbon. So trying not to re-pour concrete into the ground. So building or renovating a building as it is. And they are just not designed for wireless, which we've talked about a lot. You know, the higher the frequency, the less penetration it has through almost any substance, but certainly in the building industry, many substances. And so those buildings require more space for infrastructure. And therein lies a really deep problem that any asset owner or any owner that owns an asset over a certain age really wants to get on top of as quickly as possible. The problem is space. The older the building, as everyone will understand, the thicker the slab, the thicker the core, everything. The understanding 30 years ago of when we built a building to the understanding today is immense, just from a physical point of view, never mind a technology point of view, which is moving much faster. So yeah, the problem is much bigger than an existing building, and the problem is space, and the ability to create space in an older building.
Yeah, super.
Thomas, and we have Mr. T.R.A. Krishnan, who has joined us, and he's also raised his hand. Sir, good evening to you, and shoot, sir. You will have to unmute yourself, Mr. Krishnan, before you speak.
Hello, am I audible now?
Yes, sir, you are.
Yeah, they're very nice. In fact, the presentations by both were very revealing. I'm very happy. But only thing I would like to be interested in how they will be helping as regards to life and fire safety.
How do we have? Yeah, sorry, go ahead. Please finish.
Yeah, life and fire safety and life safety in the buildings. How you are planning to do that? Because I would very much like to listen, and so that we can start moving forward for making changes.
It's
I can jump in a little bit on that.
Go on, Stu.
Tommy, there's two elements I would answer to that. One, And forgive me, I don't know in India building code, but I can talk about a number of building codes when it comes to existing old cabling within a building. Certainly, fire regulations are really cramping down on old style cabling that perhaps runs above ceilings and up risers. Up a riser, it's a wick, like a candle wick in a building, and above ceilings, many countries looking at the regulations around what's allowed and the security, the securing, not security, of those cables because they're becoming a fire trap hazard for firefighters in a building. That's one element, which is the physical part of old existing equipment in a building causing a fire risk. And the second thing I would pick out of that is something we haven't discussed today, and that would be in our Smart Score certification, which starts to look at elements that would perhaps support digital twin information, that starts to get predictive maintenance around the safety elements of a building. And that could be in a lift system or a fire suppression system. So learning from data on what's working and what's not working in a building to try and reduce any risk element of what's happening. So there's two ways to answer that. One, totally physical, and the other really from a tech perspective. What technology can you put into a building to start learning and using AI to reduce risk elements in any safety element of a building?
That's good. Why I asked this question is because now we are taken up the revision of a National Building Code, which is a very massive exercise, along with at least about 15 more codes which are associated with the life and fire safety. So I think probably you are entering into this India by May 31st, you have written. That's a good timing so that we can interact with you and try to do whatever possible is we can put the best thing in the National Building Code.
Yeah, again, talk about existing buildings. I think you're absolutely right when it comes to new developments and that forward thinking of how we're going to do this from a technology standpoint. But the harder part is always how do you reverse park that into an old asset with old, BMS system that doesn't quite talk to the new technology of today. It's a really interesting subject that I think has to be addressed everywhere in the world.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, and we'd be really delighted to support in any way we can on the National Building Code. So please feel free to contact us. Do we have time to take a couple more from
Yeah, please, Thomas, and let's finish these. There are just
Sure.
a couple. We don't want to leave anybody. There's somebody from UAE who seems to be interested to know something.
Yes. What are the solutions and how expensive are they, and how profitable is it for service providers? Is this feasible for the UAE? We're going to give you a really disappointing answer to that question. I apologize in advance. But the truth is, there are a whole host of different solutions, ranging from, smart building technology and infrastructure, BMS systems, smart building sensors, IAQ sensors, all types of different technology that can go into your building, smart building apps. And on the kind of digital connectivity side, you've got obviously distributed antenna systems and all kinds of things. So there's a huge range of solution providers. And actually, I will say we as a standards body don't take sides on any solution being better than another. We only care about the capability of a solution. So it's very hard for us to answer kind of expensive and how profitable it is for service providers. But happy to take that one offline if you have any specific questions below that. Stu, I don't know if you have any more to add to that, but I think it's probably too difficult because it so depends on the situation.
A tiny part to add to that, in that the profitability for service providers is delivering the right environment for a service provider to put their equipment, and therefore they don't have to fault find as quickly or as poorly as they probably do, and they probably don't have as many faults as they probably do. An example of that might be an overheating MDF room causing problems, or no MDF room, and like I said earlier, a car reversing into their equipment. So having the right infrastructure in place in a building is going to reduce the amount of faults that building experiences. Therefore, surely their profitability must go up. But as Tommy says, how an independent service provider runs their business is nothing to do with us. Our job is to ensure that the building owner delivers the best asset they can when it comes from an infrastructure perspective.
Yeah.
I
couple
hope
of other
that answers you. Those of you who have some questions and would like to reach out to the WiredScore team, their email address is there on the chat box. Please make a note of it. Please do write to them. I'm sure they will respond, providing all the information that you want. Over to you, Tommy.
if we've got 2 more minutes, there's 2 here we can take quick.
Go on. We have exactly 5 more minutes.
All right, whistle stop tour. There's a quick question on, is there any level of certifications? Really easy one to answer, thankfully. So yes, the levels are certified silver, gold, and platinum. And for each level, there is a required point score. So for example, platinum is 90 to 100 credits. And it's out of 100 total. But there's also minimum standards that you have to reach. So you can't be a WiredScore Platinum building, for example, without having demonstrated good mobile coverage and performance throughout the whole building. Would be an example of one of those minimum criteria. So there are different levels. It tends to be a total mix of what people shoot for in terms of their asset age, their aspiration in terms of tenant mix, etc., etc. But yeah, it's all available actually on our website. So we for anyone who's interested to dig into more of what we measure and the criteria, we have a scorecard publicly hosted online via our website wiredscore.com, where you can click through some more of those details. And Stu, I'm gonna
you may want to touch upon the WiredScore for existing and the developments. I think that may be useful for some of the people who are asking about existing buildings.
Sure. Stu, do you want to quickly take that one?
Yep, for sure. So let's try and keep this as short as possible. Development certification is very much about planning for the future. What we have today is a great insight into what we think looks like in the future. And so building an asset today, I would like to think that we're more informed than we were 10 years ago. So yeah, development certification is very much about predicting that space for the future and what type of infrastructure you need. Occupied certification is what is the experience that you're going to get today. And probably more importantly, what is the gap analysis between what, if I had the hindsight 10 years ago when this building was built, what's the gap that I'm missing so that I can try and catch up over the next 12 months, 12 years, whatever it might be. So occupied is about today. This is what the building, users of the building will experience today. And development is about designing for the future.
So occupied is available for the existing buildings and the development is available for the new upcoming buildings.
Yeah, development, anything from the thought design process all the way through to actual build.
Right.
Super. We'll try one more and then I think we probably need to wrap. Stu, you've got 2 questions here on how different is this from uptime? So digital connectivity, resiliency, and all the things you've been talking about that WiredScore measure. Would you be able to sort of articulate the difference between measuring uptime and what we do?
Yeah, difficult to measure between the two. Uptime is very much a network logical terminology. So for instance, how long is Google up for? And that will happen right at the data center angle. And what Google would do is prove that their servers were available for 99.999% of the time. The fact that you couldn't get to it means that something else happened. And the number I shared right at the beginning, 70% of those problems are going to be physical. So there's something else not happening on the route from their data center, their servers, all the way to your laptop. And that problem, 70% of that problem is likely to be physical. In other words, the term turn it off and turn it on again doesn't exist for no reason. It's because that tends to be a physical problem. Probably someone's unplugged something is the answer. And so the difference is that physical element. So not everyone talks about it, but uptime is very much the service provider making sure that they're okay. A problem is that a landlord is now more responsible for that physical element, and they need to make sure that they don't get caught in that conundrum of who's responsible for the thing that's considered not uptime. That Google will say, well, we were 5.9 up, so it wasn't us. Someone else is carrying the can for that. And 70% of those problems will be down to physical infrastructure. And a lot of that, the landlord has some responsibility of.
Thanks, Stu. We've got two final questions that we don't have time for. One on the amount of space, but if you go on our website and look at the microsite criteria, you'll be able to see the space requirements, which I think will help bring that to life. And apologies that we haven't got time to dive into the ICD Brookfield Place study, but feel free to reach out to us on email. We've got a case study around that, and actually can even put you in touch with our Middle East team if you'd really like to learn more about that specific building, the benefits, etc. Very happy to link you up there. So please do reach out on email.
If there's anything that you guys want, please do write to Focus. We will have your questions reached out to WhiteScore, and they can reply to you. So thank you very much, each one of you, for the interest that you have shown. I must thank our President Ashish Rakeja, Ashish Jain here. I must thank my colleague, Vice President Divens, who has joined us today, Dominic from the US, where he is holidaying with his family. Thank you, Lakshmi, for the glitch-free conduct of this event this evening. Thank you very much. It was very beautifully done. And last but not the least, Thomas and Stuart, thank you very much for the support, for the interest that you have demonstrated towards India and towards the connectivity and the resilience of buildings here, the digital infrastructure. Thank you very much. We hope to connect again. We hope to have another round of discussions and a webinar where we could delve further deeper into the subject that we have discussed today. Thank you very much. You have a good evening.